All right, so the purpose of this short video is to think about, understand aggregate supply, part of our aggregate supply, aggregate demand, key model for macroeconomics. We'll be doing both short run and long run aggregate supply. So just like we did for aggregate demand, we're looking to see some sort of relationship between price level and overall output or GDP. In this case, we're thinking of the suppliers and we're wondering if they have a relationship, predictable relationship between price level and overall output that they're producing. So first thing you notice is there's an upward slope here. We assert in the short run, there's an upward slope where an increase in the price level increases the real GDP produced by suppliers. We want to know why that is. First of all, let's talk about the short run. The short run simply means there's not enough time for all prices to adjust. I'll come back to that in just a minute. So let's talk about wages and talk about why that short run aggregate supply curve is upward sloping. The key is that in the short run, before there's enough time for everything to settle out, some wages rise much more quickly than others simply because it's easier to change them. For instance, it's much easier for producers to change the price of widgets that they're selling online than it is to change the wages of the widget workers. Why is that? A lot of times there are wage contracts and other things that make wages stickier than output prices. And as a reminder, your nominal wage, not your real wage, your nominal wage is the actual current dollar value of the wages you're receiving. So nominal wages do not change as fast, we think, as widget and output prices in general. And that's going to be very, very important. So to think about this in another way, if you're a widget producer and there are some conditions in the economy that seem to suggest that your prices should be higher, well, you can change your output prices and increase your widget prices. And so your price per unit might be higher, but your wage costs, because let's say your widget workers are on a wage contract that only gets adjusted every 1 year, maybe every 3 years, those wage costs really are fixed for the time being or in the short run. So you've got an interesting situation for the producer where their price per unit is going up, but their production cost per unit is staying the same, right? So this is unchanged. And so their profit per unit is affected. Their profit per unit actually rises as wages stay fixed, but output prices go up. So all that leads to support for an upward sloping supply curve for producers in general in the short run. So your short run aggregate supply should be upward sloping because as price level rises, there's a reason to want to increase output levels because profits rise as price rises. As long as wages stay constant in the short run, there's an increase in profit simply because prices for outputs are rising more quickly than wage prices. All right, so that explains the upward slope of the short run aggregate supply curve. How about movements of short run aggregate supply? That's more interesting, and that's where we see changes and we can sort of analyze history and predict future. So, what are the things that shift the short run aggregate supply curve? Anything essentially that changes the overall productivity and profitability of firms. So anything that changes their input prices, right? Anything that changes their cost of production with regards to workers, and anything that makes their inputs more or less productive will change the cost of production and therefore change the placement of the aggregate supply curve in the short run. And what that looks like is a leftward shift is known as a decrease in aggregate supply. and a rightward shift is an increase. And the way you want to think about that is that for a leftward shift, if there's a set price and the supply curve has moved to the left, what it means is the firms are producing a lower quantity of output than before. So supply has reduced. And same over here. If you have an increase in output at a certain price level, then you've got an increase in supply. So sometimes students have a hard time with this. So here's some more examples of applications. What might cause a rightward shift in the aggregate supply? Well, what's going to make producers want to produce more at a given price level? Something that improves their productivity or their profitability, right? So remember, it looks like this, rightward shift. And it can come from cost of production. Commodity input prices are dropped. If I'm making widgets and I rely on plastics, well, if the cost of plastic drops, my cost of production overall falls and my profit rises. So I'm going to increase my supply curve along with everybody else that uses plastics in production. Or if wages drop, there has been a decline in the union movement in the U.S. since the 70s, and that has, other things equal, helped to keep wages a little bit more stagnant than they otherwise would have been and made for higher profits for firms. And we all know the tech revolution, the internet revolution especially, you've got increases in worker productivity. And even if their wages don't change, the fact that they're more productive means that the cost of production has dropped since you can get more out of your given workers. And likewise, a leftward shift can come from the reverse of those things. All right, a quick break to think about this and apply it. What might cause aggregate supply to shift to the right? There's your answer. All right, well, what's the deal with the long run? So the definition of the long run is now we have enough time to adjust. So in the long run, we want to ask the question, now that wages are allowed enough time to catch up with whatever prices have done, is there still a reason for firms to increase or decrease production when the prices change? Simply because the prices have changed. And the answer is no. We're still using the same framework, price level on the vertical axis, real GDP on the horizontal. And you want to think about the set point of the economy. When producers are making stuff and in the long run, all wages and prices are equally flexible, do they respond to prices? So the introduction here of the idea of potential output is important. This is along the lines we've talked about before. Long-run growth in the economy seems to go at a certain average level. We're usually above or below, but it averages out to a certain level. When the economy is doing well, not in recession, we tend to have a certain level of output we're capable of. That's the idea of potential output. The economy's sort of set point, how it looks when it's healthy. And your long-run aggregate supply curve is simply a vertical line at that output level, potential output, in this case, $800 billion. And regardless of the price level could be 15, could be 7.5, could be any level, there's no longer any reason for firms to adjust their production. Because if prices go up, well, wages are going to go up by the same amount. Now we have enough time for that to happen. And so there's no reason, there's no increase in profitability that would encourage firms to produce more. Likewise, if prices drop, there's no reason that firms would feel less profitable and want to shrink production. And the question, does the economy necessarily always end up here? And will it always self-correct quickly to this level is a question for another screencast. But they're good questions.